8 decades ago in southeastern China, my grandmother stood on a dock and gazed upon the sea and sky. She was only 4 years old, and while she was born into a prosperous upper-class family, she grew up distant from her mother and father. They, like many traditional Chinese parents at the time, favored their sons over their daughters to the point of neglecting the latter. My grandma therefore grew up in the care of a nanny that her parents employed. From the day of her birth, my grandma shared a unique, wholehearted mother-daughter bond with this nanny that easily surpassed that which she shared with their actual, yet often absent mother. When this nanny was compelled to leave China in order to reunite with her husband, she feared that her departure would mean no one would take care of my young grandma. And so she asked my grandma's parents if they would be willing to let their little girl come and live with her, at least for a little while. They said yes. They were glad they had someone that could take their daughter off their hands, and they cared more about her brothers than they would ever care for her anyway. They told my young grandma that she would be going on a trip to get candy with her nanny. As the colossal ship my grandma boarded drifted away from everything she had ever known, she didn't realize it was headed to the shores of Vietnam, not a fantasy land with candy galore. She didn't realize she would never return to the scenic countryside where she was raised. What she did realize years later was that her parents never intended to see her again for as long as she would live. As a kid, I heard this heartbreaking story, and I always struggled to understand how my grandma lived her entire life knowing that her parents had deliberately disowned her at the age of 4 with no good reason. It just didn't make any sense to me. And how could it? Growing up, I've had the amazing fortune of being surrounded by a huge, loving family. My grandma had 9 children, including my mom. 7 of them reside in my hometown of Mississauga in Canada with their individual nuclear families, meaning I have a lot of relatives living in close proximity, and that's not even counting my dad's side yet. Our extraordinarily large yet close-knit family enables us to congregate often and live interconnected lives where kin is always readily available to help out, whether an errand, groceries, or just general support is needed. I had a lovely childhood playing Pokemon and Minecraft with my cousins, coming over to my aunt's home after school to the smell of their cooking, visiting my grandparents regularly, and, of course, being raised by my 2 wonderful, loving parents alongside my incredibly annoying, yet beloved younger brother. And so my childhood clearly differed from my grandma's in so many fundamental ways. And after all she had been through at such a young age, I wondered how my grandma ever became the warm, life-loving, compassionate woman that I've known for the entirety of my life. She could have walked a path of anger, pessimism, cynicism. She could have felt cheated. She should have felt as if a part of her was missing. But as she fondly recalls, one thing saved her from all this hurt and all this bitterness. And it was her nanny's love. When fate cast her into a home that neglected her, her nanny accepted her, fed her, spent time with her, cared for her, supported her, loved her. And this love is the reason why she never felt the need to foster any resentment, why she never felt an urge to find and reconnect with her biological family throughout her youth, adolescence, and adulthood. Her nanny could have easily left her behind to the whim of her neglectful family, but she didn't. She chose to take my grandmother in as if she was her own child and raise her. And to my grandmother, that meant everything. Her nanny was her true home, her true family, and no rejection or mistreatment, even from her own bloodline, could take that away from her. My grandma likes to say that her nanny is the reason why she believes in the genuine goodness of people. She says that her nanny's love taught her that in this life we must be grateful for what we have rather than mourn what we don't. That in a cold world where many would turn their backs on us without a second glance, those that stand with us unconditionally are the ones that we need to hold close. I've always held these lessons that my grandma passed on from her nanny close to my heart when I consider the way I want to live my own life and the way I approach my relationships with others. Family, whether connected by blood like mine or bond like my grandma's, is agonizingly overlooked amidst a world of infinite woes, coupled with our generation's distant, chilly demeanor. We live in a society divided by discrimination and politics, ignorance and hypocrisy, poverty and greed. History tells us that humanity is a harbinger of war, a harbinger of violence. Every day in the news, we read headlines that speak of crimes, tragedies, fiascos. We meet people throughout our lives that hurt us, deceive us, abuse our trust. Through all this, it is no surprise that many of us feel as if the human race is broken beyond repair. And so it might be a bit strange when I say that during the cataclysmic era of the COVID-19 pandemic, I've unexpectedly recaptured my faith in humanity. How? By being isolated with the best of it. We have witnessed the pandemic bring the entire world down to its knees firsthand, confined within the walls of our homes and shrouded by loneliness, boredom, anxiety. This lockdown lifestyle, as relentless and draining as it has been, has given me unprecedented control over my daily schedule. And so I started to spend more and more of my time with, well, the only people I really could spend time safely in quarantine. My mom, my dad, and my younger brother. As we hung out in our backyard, watched hockey, went jogging, and binged Chinese takeout together, I grew to really appreciate their unconditional presence in my life. Life began to feel so much more simple without its usual distractions, as it really should be all the time, pandemic or no pandemic. I realized that no matter how tempestuous or chaotic the world around me may be, my family's ceaseless love would always exist as a shield that I could hide myself behind when faced with feelings of isolation, feelings of stress, feelings of despair, whenever I doubted the integrity of others, whenever I doubted the integrity of the world. I've always known this deep down, but I've always been too busy with school, too consumed by my responsibilities, commitments, pride, really, to see them as they truly were. My younger brother as my best friend, my dad as my hero, and my mom as my guardian angel. I began to truly understand the heartfelt way that my grandmother speaks of her nanny. Whether your family is big or small, whether your family is related by blood or bond, Whether your family lives in the same neighborhood or at opposite ends of the world, it is so, so important that we put aside our worries, vanity, and differences in order to spend time with family, in order to confide in family, in order to accept that we can be vulnerable with family. Because even if they may not understand our troubles, our problems, they will never stop standing with us. Give your parents a hug, hang out with your siblings, call your grandparents, reach out to your relatives overseas. When you are a part of a family, you are a part of a whole. And in turn, that whole becomes a part of you. A part of you that will always compel you to see the best in everyone you meet. A part of you that will inspire you to trust, to apologize, to forgive. A part of a little girl arriving in Vietnam 80 years ago with no one by her side but her nanny. A part of humanity that will always give us something to have faith in. We live in a world where our generation has complex feelings. We crave affection, but are embarrassed of displaying it. We wish for time, but never make the most of it. We desire fulfillment, but betray it for gratification. We yearn for trust, but romanticize cynicism. We spend our whole lives searching for love, so blinded by our own self-regard that we fail to realize love is often right in front of us. We fail to realize love is often all around us. We fail to realize that there is no need to be petrified of saying the words, "I love you." In a world of perpetual motion, it is so easy to become distracted. It is so easy to become disillusioned. It is so easy to forget that even though we may be the protagonists of our stories, there are other characters that depend on us, and there are other characters that we can depend on. There are other characters that matter. In a vast, often cruel world of hate and indifference, we must remember that where there is a capacity for love, there is a capacity for good. And all it takes is one look at those who love you to realize that. I will never lose faith in humanity. No matter how cold, no matter how dark, no matter how hopeless it may become. Because I will always have faith in my loved ones. And at the end of the day, that's all any of us can do in this short, fleeting life. Through highs and lows, through joy and pain, through life and death, family is humanity's one eternal saving grace. Tell yours that you love them. Thank you.